Hi class. You should already have worked through tutorial 1 of the Access chapter in your textbooks. It deals with organizing data. And while you've already done some work in Access prior to this recording and this demonstration, you will be going back and looking at the key terms and concepts, and I'll even be showing you some screen recordings of working through some of the Access objects. So hopefully it'll be a reinforcement for you. In organizing data, there's some terminology you want to be familiar with and how things are set up in a database. First, we have fields and tables. A field defined in your textbook is a single characteristic or attribute of a person, place, object, event, or idea, and a table is a collection of fields that describes a person, place, object, event, or idea. And specifically, your textbook looks at figure 1-1, dealing with the patient table. And if you'll look at that illustration, you see a series of columns and rows. It looks a lot like a spreadsheet. As a matter of fact, data sheet view in Access looks like a spreadsheet, but don't get that confused with Excel spreadsheets. But let's look at figure 1-1 at that spreadsheet layout, and you have columns: patient ID, first name, last name, phone. All of those columns represent fields of data for each individual patient. Now you'll also notice that all those combined, if we process it, gives us some information about a particular patient. And all of this collection of fields makes up a table. Now we can break this down even further or expand it out depending on which angle you want to look at that. But if we look at the first row, we have a piece of data called a patient ID number in the patient ID field. For that first row, you have a first name in the first name field, Edward in this case. Then you have the last name, Darcy, in the last name field, and then a phone number in the phone number field. All four pieces of data combined there creates a record about that individual patient. So when we look at that illustration of the patient table, we see columns as fields and rows are records. So the set of field values that are common to one another or that relate to one another sets up a record. For example, patient ID 22501, first name Edward, last name Darcy, phone 860-305-3985 makes up a record about Edward Darcy, the patient. Now, databases are also called relational databases. And back in the day, you might have just had a database with a single table. But for many, many years now, we have what's called a relational database that permits the creation of more than one table in a single database. The purpose of that is to reduce redundancy or duplication, in other words. We don't want to have to duplicate the same data throughout our database and throughout a single table, because that creates storage issues and efficiency issues. So what we do is have multiple tables within a database, and they give you an example of that in figure 1-2. How does the data between multiple tables relate to one another? Well, there will be a common field, a field that exists. Say if I have just two tables, a field that will exist in the first table and the second table, so that data can be cross-referenced between the two. So think about what it means to cross-reference something. You've got to have something. If you've got a list of items on the left and a list of items on the right, you've got to have something that's common to both lists that identifies how they connect with one another. And so that's what a common field does in a database that contains more than one table, and the tables are related to one another. So in figure 1-2, we see the patient table and the visit table. So we're seeing what patient came in for what visit and for what reason. So if we look at the patient table, you'll notice that every patient has a patient ID number. But you'll also find that patient ID field is in the visit table as well. But now if you look at the patient table, the ID numbers only occur once. Why is that? Because no two patients can have the same patient ID number. So that patient ID number uniquely identifies that patient. But when we look at the patient ID field in the visit table, if you'll look at that, go down to about the fourth record and you'll see patient ID 22529, and go down 2 more records and you see it again. So why is it I can have the same patient number more than once in the visit table? Well, that's because the visit table is not designed to set up records about the individual patients. It's set up to identify each individual visit. Okay, and it just happens to be that that patient visited twice. Can you see the difference there? So you'll also see in the visit table 4 fields, one for visit ID. Notice that every visit has its own unique number for an ID. If you go to the doctor on August the 31st, hopefully not, that was a Sunday, but if you go and then you turn around and you go again the next day, that's going to be 2 different visits. If you go on September the 5th to the doctor that morning and you go home and all of a sudden you're sicker and you decide to go back to your doctor instead of to the emergency room, when you go back to the doctor, that's going to be recorded as a separate visit from what you did that morning. So that can happen. So here we look at this. Now, if we go back to the patient table, in that table, the patient ID field is the primary key field for that table. A primary key field can only house or store unique values. No 2 records can have the same value in the primary key field. So if we look at the patient table, the primary key field is the patient ID, and you will notice that no 2 records as you go down that column have the same value. So you tell me, what is the primary key field in the visit table? Do you know? Think about it. Which field requires a unique value to be assigned so that that record can be uniquely identified? You've got it, the visit ID field. Okay? Not the patient ID, because remember, a patient could go visit that doctor or facility or whatever more than once. Okay? Which patient 22529 did just that. When they go, some visits, you've got multiple people who make visits on the same day. So there could be dates that are the same visit date. If you go to a doctor's office, typically you're not the only one that shows up for that whole day. Other people are there on the same day. And then for reasons, multiple patients can go for visits for the same reason. For example, you'll look and see annual wellness visit is down there for 3 times. Not all for the same patient, okay? But that 3 people went in for a wellness visit that time, okay? So But let's back up again. Now we've talked about primary key, and we said that in the patient table, the patient ID field is the primary key field. But it's also the common field because it exists in both the patient table and the visit table. Okay? The table where the values have to be unique and not duplicated anywhere, in this case in the patient table, is the table that holds that field as the primary key field. But the related table that also has that field, but where values can be duplicated, for that table, that field is called a foreign key field. So if I have a common field that exists, it exists in two tables. The table where the value has to be unique to identify records individually and uniquely, the field is called the primary key field. But in the related table, it is called the foreign key. Okay? Hopefully we're good with that. Now, the system that lets you manipulate related databases is called a database management system, or DBMS, or a relational database management system, where data is organized as a collection of tables. Okay, a relational DBMS controls the storage of databases and facilitates the creation, manipulation, and reporting of data. Okay, some of the functions specific to relational database management systems are that they allow you to create database structures containing fields, tables, and table relationships. They let you add new records, change field values in existing records, and delete records. They contain a built-in query language, which lets you obtain immediate answers to the questions or queries that you ask about your data. It contains a built-in report generator, which lets you produce professional-looking formatted reports from your data, and it protects databases through security, control, and recovery. So there are a lot of things that can go on with this. Now, you've heard me do a lot of talking here and seen no demonstration. But unfortunately, my recording software only allows me to record so many minutes at a time. So I'm going to end this verbal lecture here, and I'm going to create another recording where we're actually looking at the software. So please be sure to join me on that. Okay?